Hello and welcome to Through the Reticle. So here we are, another edition of the internet radio show Through the Reticle with me, your host, Sam Turner. I do hope this finds you well. Now, if you're a fan of the whole InRetroSpect podcast brand and you listen to other shows other than my own, then firstly, well done. Secondly, you might remember on an episode of Freeplay, I can give you the exact details. It was a mobile gaming special. It was entitled The Wrath of Chris, episode 39, and it was all the way back in July. Now, the reason this was quite significant, this episode, I should say, of Freeplay, was that we played a game in it called 1800. And if you remember back to the podcast, Dan got quite good at this game. He's still, I think, the top 15 in the world at this particular title. It's a free game on the App Store. I implore you to play it. It is it's simplicity and depth personified. 1800. Now, the people who make that, a company called Parachuting Frog, after we did the podcast, they got in touch with us to say that they'd heard it, they liked it, what we said about it, and thanks very much. And we thought that was that. But then a few months ago, James Parker, the programmer involved with Parachuting Frog, got in touch with the Gremlin on Twitter, and luckily the Gremlin was in a hospitable mood and asked us if we wanted to do anything around their new game, which is called Solisqr. And luckily I jumped in just before the Gremlin refused, and I thought it would be nice for this edition of Through the Reticle to bring you an interview with James Parker himself, one of the minds behind Parachuting Frog. They brought us Asteroid 1800, and we talk about his new game Solisqr as well, which is free. It's out now on the App Store. I think you should go and download it and play it. But anyway, here's me talking to James Parker from Parachuting Frog. So hello James and welcome to Through the Reticle. I do hope this finds you well. You got a brand new game out from Parachuting Frog. Now some of our listeners might have heard the name Parachuting Frog before because we've played one of your games on an episode of Freeplay, which is 1800.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so this is your new game Solisqr. It was launched yesterday. How did that go? What's it like to launch a game on the App Store and into the wide world, as it were?
Very nervy. It's the point of the process that I get most nervous about, to be honest, because you put your heart and soul into a game, and your friends will naturally tell you it's the greatest game ever. But then, it's a harsh world out there, and but in fairness, we had some very positive and good comments about it. I mean, as you mentioned, one of our previous games was 1800, and we've taken that kind of theme on a bit. We've listened to the feedback we got about making it a bit more polished. Yeah. But still, we're not a big game studio. We don't have loads of resources available to us, so we try to keep to a kind of a minimalist, en vogue kind of style to it, but try and focus as much on the gameplay as possible. And the kind of concept for it all came out about the Peg Solitare board game, which I got hugely frustrated with as a kid. And if anything, it was kind of therapy to try and solve the puzzle. But with it was adapting it to make it colourful and minimalist, but also have something that you do want to come back to and try and solve it. So that it's been a rush, as it always is on the launch day, to see how. Constantly looking at these charts to see how it's faring in all the countries and seeing it slowly climb up, thankfully. So it's been a good day.
Fantastic. You said that Parachuting Frog is quite a small team. How many people have you are involved with the making? Just the two of you?
Yeah. So how it works is we're husband and wife business. I predominantly do the development. Artistic kind of side of it will be either myself or my wife, but the testing, the admin, the arranging thing is done by my wife. So it's and it's not necessarily a full-time venture either. So we
really?
put a lot of evenings and weekends into it, but it's and that really defines the scope of our games. What we can realistically turn around, what we can. We try and aim for currently 2, maybe 3 games a year. So, being realistic about we can't have AAA graphics and all that kind of stuff. So the timing almost dictates our style. But because, I'm in my mid-30s, I've been playing games for as long as I care to remember, but my wife wasn't a big gamer until, we got involved in this. So it's really good sounding board to see. I hate the term casual gamer, but, in terms of she would be probably classed as one, and making sure that we fine tune the gameplay to make sure. 1800 was a prime example where we just wanted that quick pick up and play. I've only got a few minutes to play it, but actually with 1800 you get through about 5-6 levels in that time. And Solisqr was one of these ones where we put in the casual element where you can try and solve the puzzle, but once you've solved it, you've then got the timed element where you can just try and keep, you can jump into it 20, 30, 40 seconds at a time, depending on how good you are, and try and beat your best score. So, all these things are weighted towards individuals and how they want to play it. So, as always, there's a bit more behind it than it may at first seem.
Yeah, Solisqr is, I've been playing it for a few days, and it's... And I have these memories of playing that traditional board game, the Solitaire with the Peg Solitaire.
That's right.
And it was only when I played Solisqr that I remembered the kind of frustration that I felt then to playing Solisqr now. And as you say, the design is very simple to 1800. Those sort of, and this is the thing that we all liked about and talked about on Freeplay. Just so it's that no messing, that clean, clear cut design. But yet there is that sort of hidden depth within the title. So was it kind of your memories of the game that made you wanted to kind of update it a little bit and bring it to a newer market? Where did the idea to bring and create Solisqr around such a traditional board game come around?
It was actually born out of, as I mentioned, being a smaller studio. We're trying to find ways that we could potentially produce apps quicker. We don't have the resources, either people or money, to produce lots of titles. So what we were focusing on was building almost like a grid framework where we could produce things like a Connect 4 game or a tic-tac-toe or noughts and crosses, and Peg Solitaire was one that I remember playing quite a lot, and it kind of fitted in with the grid framework, and as I sort of developing the grid, I found that the Solitaire game was certainly by far the strongest, and it didn't look as you see it now. It was it was very rough and ready, and I was looking at all the kind of the wooden board games, and I really didn't like that style in terms of how we wanted to present it. So because we're only a young studio as well. We've only been going about 2 years, and we're not from a gaming background. We were on quite a journey ourselves to understand how this industry works, and we're not trying to bite off more than we can chew. And with that, that's why we're starting with something simple. And 1800, without a doubt, was that. You can't get any quicker than, easier than stopping a line on something. And Solitaire or Solisqr, as we called it, was taking it on a little bit further with a known formula and the way that the puzzle works. So I didn't have to think about coming up with lots of different mechanics. That could take forever to come up with 200 levels. Which, to be honest, through the beta process was a lot that people mentioned about would I consider introducing other levels to it or different boards and all that kind of stuff. But we've always tried staying key to what we're actually focusing to do, and that was to make a quick, small, simple, engaging game, and to build upon that. So I guess it's like I say earlier on, it was born out to actually do lots of research into actually how to solve the puzzle, because I think that was therapy in itself. But then to adapt it and build in mechanics that are more appropriate to the mobile market.
I mean, what's interesting is bringing personality to a game like that, because it's just, the clues in the title. It is a very solitary game compared to much of what's on the App Store. That you're encouraged to share your progress. You're encouraged to kind of go up against people in the early stages of the game. But Solisqr does start out as a very solitary experience, but you manage to get quite a lot of the personality of definitely your personality and parachuting frogs into it. Were you worried that people will be put off by what is kind of a very one-on-one experience?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, the game actually did start off almost as a turn-based. But we found out the Game Center turn-based stuff. We've had issues with iOS 7 and some of the developer tools that come with it, which was making it a little bit challenging. But we also found that really the multiplayer element wasn't really adding anything to it at that stage. It didn't start off as a timed game. It was literally just solve the puzzle. But we added in the timed element. And funny enough, the bit you mentioned there about leaderboards and that kind of stuff. One of the very last things we added in was a beat the best, which is the time modes are unlockable. So you're always encouraged to try and
get faster.
But you go faster, and it sets a certain benchmark in terms of what you need to get to unlock the next difficulty level. The very last level, it's not really giving anything away, it's called Beat the Best. And what that is the very best time in the world, as per the rankings of the Game Center leaderboard, is the time that you need to try and beat. And again, that has two elements to it. One, it's forever refreshing. Hopefully people do continue to play it. So it's got this draw of bringing you back in to see what the latest time is. But also there's achievement to unlock by being the world beater. So if you become the best time, you unlock an achievement, which a lot of people want to try and get all the achievements. And what it also does is it puts your Game Center handle as the name to beat. So there's that certain bragging rights of being however many thousands or tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever it ends up being downloads. There is that incentive for your name to be all over it. So, and that's why I think the extra dimension of the time brings to, certainly during the beta process. Unfortunately, all my beta testers didn't actually know how to solve the problem, the puzzle. So they never saw this extra dimension to it. But once you solve the puzzle, and to be honest, I had to obviously solve it very early into the process for my wife and I to be able to test it. I think the current time, because I've set the beat the best time, obviously, because I didn't need to have something, and that is currently 22 seconds.
Wow.
Is to do the board. So there's something hopefully in it for everybody. But having looked around through the reviews and the App Store and that kind of stuff, it's certainly not one of those games that you look at it and think, my goodness, that's really pushing my new iPhone 5S to its max, and that's not really what we're about. It's hopefully that people will give it a go. It's a free download, and really start investing the time in it. I mean, without a doubt, that's what we got the most out of 1800. And I think in the last podcast where you were lucky enough to actually cover one of our games. I think that's where it hit home, that if you are encouraged to just go that little step further and your own personal goals and stuff, and you can see where you can beat it, and that's what we try to instill within it. Yeah,
I think Dan. I was meeting Dan quite recently. He was probably the one of us who really got 1800 really got the claws underneath him, and I think he's still in the top 15.
Yes, he is,
in the world actually at the moment, so he's still very excited about that fact.
Well, he's actually above me, which is almost depressing.
he'll be so happy to hear that. I know he will. Going sort of back to the companies itself, I was looking on your website, parachutingfrog.com, and there's a really interesting thing you talk about where you mention this quote from Dr. K. Anders Ericsson. And sort of the 10,000 hour theory.
Yes, that's right.
Can you explain something a bit more behind what that is and how that's kind of responsible for the games that you're making and like Solisqr?
Sure. I mean, it was actually kind of the main motivation to start up the game studio. Really, I'm probably one of millions of people who potentially get home from work at the end of a busy day and just plonk themselves on the sofa, and that's pretty much where their evening ends. And I kind of thought, well, I'm looking at the television, I'm not really engaging or getting anything from it, but it's, I've got young children, you don't necessarily get the opportunity to go out to, socialise necessarily or go to clubs and all this kind of thing. So I thought, well, I've got this 2 or 3 hours of an evening where I'm sitting with my wife, we're talking about our day, but I've still got this time I could be doing something with. And what the 10,000 hour theory is about is it is kind of perceived that if you apply 10,000 hours to anything, you can become an expert in it. And it's obviously up to you what motivates you, what you want to apply those hours to. Now, I read a book called Outliers, as well as seeing a website called the Dan Plan. And the Dan Plan is about a chap, I believe is a freelance photographer, who'd also had a kind of a similar epiphany and read the same kind of book, where he was actually going to apply, he'd gone slightly more extreme to myself. He wanted to, within 5 years, or with 10,000 hours, can't exactly remember how religious he's been to it, it's become a professional golfer. So from having never picked up a golf club before, his goal was to get his PGA Tour card over in America. And so he went about it by going something completely extreme, completely out of his depth, if you like, and religiously try it. And it's a great read in terms of, one, I do like playing golf myself, but where I thought to apply it, I mean, my main skill is a programmer, but what I hadn't necessarily done is channeled it to anything in particular. That is my profession, but it's not what I was building up as my own enterprise or my own initiative. But what I wanted to do was to give myself structure into writing mobile apps and games. So what I thought to do is I'd write a plan that within 5 years I'd apply 10,000 hours to it, and each year have a certain goal of certain things to achieve, that by the time, dare I say it, that I'm 40, that I'd achieve some things I can tick off, whether it's paying off my mortgage or whatever those goals were. And it was breaking those 10,000 hours down into, say, like, it's not my full-time job at present, the parachuting frog, but what it is that I apply 2, maybe 3 hours an evening. Now that does sound a lot, having done a hard-working day, but most people have that time, and chip away at writing games and having achievable goals and targets, all this kind of stuff, and build yourself up. So I'm about 1,600 hours into the 10,000 hours at the moment, and it's probably taken me about 2 years to get to that. But on average, I'm probably doing 12 to 15 hours a week at weekends or evenings as the programming side, and I'd say my wife does the testing and the running the admin side of the business. So, but I don't include her bit within it. This is more aimed at the development side. Otherwise, I'll be whizzing through those hours. So that's principally what it was about. It was about giving focus and structure to make sure that we actually achieved the goals we wanted to. It's very easy to say. And I've read lots of articles about everybody has a dream of writing an app, but when they realise just how hard it is, they get put off by the first one. But you've actually learned so much along that journey that actually your second, your third and your fourth, or wherever it may be, you're always adding what you've learned before and adding a bit more. I mean, my marketing, for example, for 1800 was atrocious. I mean, I just stuck it out there and saw what happened, and very, very fortunate that a big review website picked it up, and then it went on from there. Yeah. This time I built up contacts, and not least yourselves, and we can have conversations, and you build the exposure, and each launch day becomes bigger, and your games start becoming a bit more polished and sophisticated, and that's the structure that 10,000 hours has given to me. I've got a motivator in seeing the hours go up, as well as products that are being produced that are the fruits of my labour. So it's I personally find it very very motivational, and it's certainly helping me manage expectations as well, because it's very easy to look at games saying, right, I'm going to write the next Angry Birds Go or Minecraft or that kind of stuff. But there's thousands of man hours that go into that, and realistically, you're never going to write a game like that by yourself. But the way we've approached it with 1800 and Solisqr is just stripping back a good idea to its raw mechanics and something that's achievable, but then making it look nice and engaging, and adding those little quirks is. Certainly seems to strike a chord with people. I mean, we've been very fortunate with the amount of good comments and number of downloads that we have. We're certainly not going to retire on the money that we've got. It's it's what we set out to do.
From the experience that you've had then applying this theory and making games, it's obvious that the way that you're working is having a dramatic impact on the games that you're making. Mm-hmm. Is there a small part of you, based on that experience, that thinks that you'd like to set down and maybe use the remaining few thousand hours to just concentrate on making one big game?
Do you know, I haven't just got to Solisqr. I was thinking about that very question last night, and it's whether that, having spent the last 2 years building up to this point where I'm actually ready for, between the two of us, we're actually ready for a bigger venture. And I think that I'm not a game designer, and I think, to be honest, that's probably one of the areas. I mean, if someone came to me with a game design, I'm pretty confident I could convert that into code and write the app. Mm-hmm. I think because I don't have the game design elements, and probably my limits are being shown within 1800 and Solisqr, to be honest, and that's forever growing, understanding what people want. To actually take on a bigger project, I would probably wonder and think, well, I've only got a finite amount of time per week. Am I making the right decision with going with this one? I mean, without a doubt, the first year I did it, we only launched, I think it was one game, and I spent about 7 months. We just went round and round thinking, well, this isn't good enough, this idea, and no, I don't think people are going to like it. So
was that Asteroid, the first one?
Asteroid was the very first one, which, to be honest, I look back at it now and think, wow, how far we've come.
I was playing it again today, and I was just thinking, compared to just the way it looks and the way it plays and handles, compared to 18, it's kind of such a huge leap.
And to be honest, I sometimes think about, I'm almost a little embarrassed still having it on there, but equally I actually quite like it as a reminder to myself. You mentioned the 10,000 hour thing. It's almost plotting the progress by, I've seen other, the bigger developers like the Nimblebit brothers. I mean, they were quite an inspiration to me with their early apps, and then obviously they got big with Pocket Frogs and Tiny Tower and all this kind of stuff. But I've certainly seen, I think it's in the last year, the first efforts have now been taken off App Store, which I can understand. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to think, we could mirror some of that success. Even if we have partial success, I'd be happy with that. But yeah, I mean, without a doubt, I think Asteroid is one of those ones that we really tried to have a first clue about how to write a game, and we're incredibly proud of it when we first wrote it, because there it was sitting on our phone and people were playing it and all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But again, the feedback for having it polished, and there's not enough depth to the gameplay, and it needs to have more to it. It's why it's manifested in 1800 about having different levels and the way that the menu system was structured. So the feedback you get is it's incredibly valuable, and even some of the things from Solisqr through in beta and the promo codes and that kind of stuff is that you can. I mean, any kind of criticism, I don't mind. I mean, we tried to add translations into Solisqr for different languages, and we're supporting 7 languages in it, and that's been interesting because it's an experiment to see whether localized content has an impact in terms of the engagement of the user. Given how simple it is, and even if we've added a tutorial in, but how much of a difference that actually makes to somebody, because eventually I think they would get it. Yeah. It's speaking to those people and see if that actually makes a difference to their world. I mean, we have used some automated translations for some of the languages, and boy, that's a mistake that I won't be doing again because that's been pointed out to me today. But it's it's all positives. I mean, if we were a true professional game studio, we could get arrogant and quite resentful about some of the comments. And I know some people get really quite hurt about some of the reviews that happen on the App Store. But the beauty of the App Store is that a single two people in our case against a multi studio. Let's take, for example, I didn't know what was being launched alongside Solisqr yesterday, but when it was Grand Theft Auto, Angry Birds Go, and The Room 2, and a few others, you think, goodness me, we're never going to get any kind of exposure. But the very fact that we can be launching on the same day and sitting on the App Store and sitting on a new released email or tweet that's going out is the great part of it. And whatever the criticism is, people are saying it for a reason, and there's positives in every comment. So it's definitely a great adventure, and certainly the Asteroid to 1800 was a big leap, and that was motivated about an initiative called One Game a Month. Which is, as it suggests, you write one game a month, and we started doing that. And but we found actually we wrote a game called Why Did the Chicken, and that was basically a Frogger conversion for a chicken crossing the road, which obviously at the time we thought was hysterical, but it wore very thin after a while, and we didn't decide to launch that one. But that was actually the follow-up that came shortly after Asteroid. But 1800 was a very fortunate mistake. I think we wrote that actually in about, I think it was not much more than about 20 hours of development, which is unheard of really. But because the mechanics of it are quite simple, it's we were very fortunate with that. But then, like I said, the grid and all that kind of stuff, and trying to build something bigger and scalable and better, and taking all the comments, is what we've been doing since April when we launched 1800. Not least also that we also released an update to 1800 yesterday as well, which is a new level called Survival on it, which is trying to survive the whole 20 levels without dying, basically, and so you can get the biggest score. So that should keep people interested.
That'll keep Dan happy, anyway.
Yeah, so you become even more obsessional with it then. So.
Yes.
So that's what it is really. I mean, it's been a great experience today, and looking forward to all the feedback that comes back from it.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you can probably guess from my reaction to it, I've really enjoyed Solisqr, and I'm not a big mobile gamer, and I don't have that many games on my iPad, so it's nice. I think it's nice to just have something that I do feel is kind of a one-on-one experience. Just quickly, as a sort of you say you're not a game designer and it's not your full-time job. Is there anything about the process that has shocked or surprised you? Anything you kind of didn't expect, or even put you off about game design and publishing things to the App Store?
I mean, the App Store process as a whole is a blessing and a curse, really. I mean, it's we haven't yet put our stuff onto Google Play Store or Android as a whole. I mean, we did dabble with that for Android, but we haven't yet gone back to that. And while it can get very frustrating with some of the mechanics and provisioning profiles and certificates, and any developers listening to this will almost certainly have gone through a pain on this at some point. What's great about it is the discoverability of your apps. I mean, since it went to iOS 6, your visibility of your app is that much better than it was maybe a year ago. So that's and the whole ecosystem and how easy it is to get paid and publish yourself to the world is without a doubt that's the positive. Mm-hmm. I think the hardest bits that I found really is it's certainly opened my eyes up to how important the smaller details are. I mean, the music within our apps, any of them, I'm not happy with. I mean, it's stuff that we've settled on rather than thinking that's really added to the experience. Probably Solisqr was probably the first one we we've got more sound effects than we've ever had it into before, and that's the first time like a little oops and all that kind of stuff. We make a wrong move and a kind of a little tinkle and that kind of stuff. So, we've tried to add little details like that, but I think we're almost getting to the stage now where we're looking at all the experiences, whether that's music, whether that's more effects within it without taking away. I mean, probably the main we played around a lot with the explosion of the squares within Solisqr to not have it, a big explosion of dynamite and all this kind of stuff, but to have kind of almost a soft petal-like effect of the which is more akin to what we're trying to get across. So I wouldn't say anything's necessarily off-putting, but I think that's probably more our mindset about what we're going on. I mean, it depends what you go into it. I mean, if you read our blog and our press releases and all that kind of stuff, I mean, without a doubt, like anybody, as much as we make it for the love of making games, there's also that financial element to it. You often hear about the absolute 0.001% success stories when in actual fact it's incredibly hard to make money, which is why probably we haven't made the transition to it being full-time, because we haven't yet had that that full-time that big sale. But I know some of the people that kind of started off around sort of the same time as I did, that they've had some great success from it. So it's definitely possible. You just got to back yourself and really get out and market yourself. I mean, if you're not from that world and you're a bedroom developer and you just want to code away, that the marketing element may seem very, very alien, but it's just as important as a good idea. And I've certainly learnt that. So yeah, it's that polish and the marketing which has probably been the hardest elements of it.
Yeah. So what's next then? Are you already thinking of the follow-up or next game or?
Yeah, we've got a few collaboration opportunities that through some of the exposure we've got, that we've been approached to sort of help out on some projects which are interesting. We may consider that, which is great for us that we've even been considered as a small little enterprise. And yeah, we've got, as you mentioned earlier on, we've got a slightly bigger game that we're looking at and planning, which we're quite excited about. I think realistically, it's probably going to take us quite a bit longer. I think we're probably looking at the summer of next year, depending on whether we take on any of the collaboration ones or whether we look to just do a small little experience app, should I say, that's meant to be a play and throw away. But we're and if we do that, we'll stick to our guns and have a free app and not look to make necessarily too much money from it, and because it's building upon whatever the next big thing is. So yeah, so we've got some ideas. We're quite excited about them. So we'll see what happens.
And after the 10,000 hours are up and you finally clocked up that that landmark, depending if you get success or not, or you've made 5 or 6 more games, do you think you'll just walk away from games design? Can you see yourself just thinking that'll be it and sort of finish with it once you've clocked up 10,000 hours?
I don't think so, to be honest. I think it's like anything. I mean, a lot of people apply it to a musical instrument, learn the violin or whatever it is. I think once you've invested so much time in it, you may set yourself a goal and think, yeah, great, I've done that. But the app world, whether it's PC, via Steam or something, there's always going to be something to apply this to. And who knows where the mobile market will be by the time I've actually clocked up 10,000. It'll probably be some kind of chip in my head or something. But, and there will always be something to apply it. And I don't know. I'd like to think not. I'd like to think this is building the foundations to the rest of my career, building up a business that's sustainable for us as a family and grow it beyond that. So, good question. I guess it's focusing on that first 10,000 hours first.
Yeah, and then move on to the next.
Yes, I'll probably maybe take up the violin after that.
Well, thanks, James, for taking time out of your busy day to speak to me, and it's a really interesting and inspiring story. And I'd encourage anyone to pick up Solisqr and definitely give it a go. I think it doesn't take very long for you to get for myself to become quite obsessive about just trying to solve it, let alone trying to beat other people's time. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you again very much, James, for your time to speak to me about your new game, Solisqr. As I said throughout that interview, I think you should download it. It's a really interesting game because it's based on such an old principle, and it is very solitary, which quite a lot of app games I don't feel are these days. So I think it's really worth picking up and playing, and definitely 1800 as well. Great company, and really exciting to hear and see what else they come out with. I think one of the most exciting things about the computer game industry these days is that folks like James and his wife can have an idea and apply a theory to something, and then have such a big store and a big place to put it on, and to have success through that. I think that's really exciting. So anyway, thanks again to you for listening to that. I hope you enjoyed it. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, all over the place, InRetroSpectPodcast.com, Facebook, YouTube. We're all over the shop. Leave us a review. Just look at our stuff. Ingest our content. I hope you have a good Christmas. I'm Sam Turner, and this has been Through the Reticle.